Hello, everyone. This week we're going to be talking about missionaries in our lesson in Module 3. Well, what are missionaries? Of course, we've run across them before. The idea of a missionary is one that you're probably all familiar with. What we are looking particularly at this week, however, is the role of Jesuit missionaries in colonial expansion in North American territories. And so we're going to be looking at, to introduce a concept that has been important in imperial expansion lessons in previous discussions, proselytization. Missionaries proselytize, that is, they try to create new converts for, in this case, the Catholic Christian cause by going out into new territories, such as the indigenous territories that we've looked at in the last lesson, and we're going to be looking at more this lesson, and try to convince or make the local peoples become Christians. There's a lot for us to think about in terms of perspectives and significance and other historical thinking concepts, but give us a little bit more background, Danny.
Sure. The Jesuits they're actually very famous historically. They still exist today,
Right.
Religious order. You may, in fact, have seen a Jesuit in your lifetime. They dress entirely in black. They continue to wear the long black robes.
Yeah.
In fact, there's the film called Black Robe, which is that comes from that.
And the current Pope.
The current Pope is a Jesuit, in fact. Yeah, exactly. They're famous for a lot of things. They're famous kind of for their vigor, their strong faith. They're often considered slightly over the top in terms of their faith. But they're also famous for education.
Yeah.
And they're famous as running very effective schools. And lots of you certainly see this in Africa and South America today. A lot of schools continue to be run by Jesuits today. So that basic pattern that we see today is begun in the 17th century.
Important for proselytization, for missionary work.
Absolutely. So they're bringing the Word of God, the Catholic version of the Word of God, to the heathens of these countries, and then spreading the Christian faith in that kind of manner. So so we're in North America, but this is happening in Africa. This is happening in Asia. This is happening in Australia. This is happening literally all over the emerging colonial world in this time period. So they're very, very important. They're important for a whole bunch of reasons. And we're going to look at them as missionaries, as people who are trying to spread the words of God. And that's certainly a clear role that they play. But what becomes more interesting, particularly for us in this course, is understanding the other role that they may have played. And this is a more contested area. Their role as agents of empire, of encouraging and spreading colonization.
Okay, so the relationship between religious and political life then, or the institutional church and the state. Yeah.
If we go back to that first lesson on imperial expansion, we saw people discussing the reasons to justify, to legitimize expansion. It was mostly about, there are these resources there that we can acquire for ourselves and make ourselves richer. But they always mention spreading the word of God. Mm-hmm. The people that we've been focusing on are doing the commercial end of that. Yeah. These are the people doing the religious side of that. Yeah. And what we see is that they come together in some ways, and they certainly advance similar programs. But their aims and their intentions are something we can talk about and discuss.
So there's no clear separation then of religious values and economic values and political values. We have to think of those as useful categories for our own analysis, perhaps.
We can separate them, but ultimately we see that they come back together again. Yeah.
Okay.
So very, very important for understanding that. For historians, the Jesuits are really important too because they wrote a lot. Yeah. There's a whole series of works that have been published in a couple of editions, translated into English, translated into French. Many of them are written, most of them are written in Latin, but they're called the Jesuit Relations. Yeah. And of course that means they're relating their tales. They're the relations of the Jesuits. And they wrote prodigiously. They're writing letters back to Rome, back to France, telling what's going on, describing what's happening. And these things play a very important role because they're very detailed. These are very educated men. Early modern society doesn't have a lot of very well-educated men. All Jesuits are very well-educated men. They write well, they write effectively, they tell a lot of stories.
And they know multiple languages, which is also significant in understanding the relations with the peoples that they were running across for the first time.
Exactly.
Because they were interested, as I understand it deeply, in understanding cultures from the inside.
They firmly believe that conversion is only possible if they understand the culture they're encountering. So they they're like anthropologists. They're not trained like anthropologists, but they think like anthropologists. They're thinking, I want to understand those people, I want to understand their culture, and that's a way for me to insert Christianity into their culture.
So they are thinking in some ways as we are trying to as historians.
Yeah.
They're trying to recognize their own perspective, their own situation, their own place in the world, and then where other people are coming from their points of view. But with, for them, a political,
Absolutely.
a religious,
Absolutely.
a purpose in mission work. That's
Absolutely.
different than our work as historians.
Absolutely. And it allows us to get up close and see this relationship, often on a one-on-one level. Oftentimes they're talking about, I had a conversation with a man last night and he told me this. So we can see things that simply aren't available to us as historians otherwise.
Yeah.
Problematic texts in all kinds of ways, and that's what we're going to talk about in this week's readings. There's all kinds of critical perspectives we can bring to bear here, but still fabulous sources for understanding this time period.
So a good point to introduce the big question, or do we need some more background?
No,
first?
I think this is the basic point we're going to get at. How could we characterize the role of the Jesuits in New France? Now, we're only looking at New France. We're going to look at Acadia, modern-day Nova Scotia, and Canada, modern-day Quebec. We're going to look at a couple of Jesuits in those territories and how they described the people they were encountering. And you'll see some remarkable things here. But what we want to do is be able to step back from that and say, how are they understanding these people? What's the general way we can characterize their relationship with those people?
So worldview is, again,
Absolutely.
Something that's significant here, because this is, in fact, how one group of people with a particular Christian Catholic worldview and a colonialist worldview are trying to understand another people's worldviews, and we're trying to understand their worldviews.
Exactly. So we can look at them at one very simple level and say, what are they doing?
Yes.
We can look at it and say, what are their aims? Because we can see they express their aims. They express very, very clearly. Part of the thing, we should perhaps mention this, that the relations they're not just letters. They're not just saying, hey guys, guess what I'm doing? There's a purpose here. They're selling these tracts back in France, back in Italy. They're raising money for their colonization, for their missionary activities through the sale of these. So they want them to be engaging. They want them to be interesting. They want to tell interesting stories, but they want to highlight that they're doing God's work. So when people buy these, they're not just buying an interesting thing, which is certainly part of what's being purchased, but you're also purchasing something that advances Christianity's cause. So again, there's that dual purpose underway there, and the relations have to be seen through that kind of lens.
Okay, so there's money involved.
This is for sure.
And we're going to be talking in a later lesson in this module about consumerism.
Yes.
This is an early example of ideas in a marketplace.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
That's a fascinating angle, but it's one in the background then. How much should everyone be paying attention to that?
It's in the background, but it is coloring their purpose. It is very much. Those guys are there for a particular reason. They're not just there to tell stories. They're there to tell stories for a purpose. So we need to know that purpose.
So understanding the subtext, looking at what's on the page, but then trying to figure out what's going on in the minds of people and how they're seeing the world. And
exactly. And we can read those, and despite all their biases, we can still read them intelligently. We can still learn things from these sources.
Yeah, like we always have to do as historians.
Exactly. And speaking of historians who work with these texts have interpreted them really quite differently. We're going to see a dimension of that this week as well.
Yes, one of the big important learning challenges, historical thinking challenges for this module and for the rest of the course, one that we've already practiced in some way, is adding a dimension of historiographical thinking to the historical thinking skills that we've been learning. And we've just discussed for a few minutes now. So for this week, we're going to be reading excerpts from work by two historians, Blackburn and
Carol
Seaman.
Blackburn.
And
Eric Seaman.
Eric Seaman, thank you. And these two particular historians are each providing an interpretation of quite a complex and rich array of primary sources. What we want everyone to do is think about what each author says. We're going to be getting each group to read only one of the two texts for this week. So when you read either Carol Seaman or Carol Blackburn or Eric Seaman, what you should do is think about how each interprets the role of the Jesuits in their relationship with the indigenous populations of New France. But then, that's the historiographical dimension, how historians make sense of the complex past. Then see what you can do to contribute to or test what Blackburn or Seaman say based on your careful, close reading of the primary sources that we've provided. And then you can also look at how the other group, using the text, the historiographical text that you didn't read, made sense of the primary sources.
Right. And if you're listening to this before you've read the introduction, we should make clear that you're only going to read one of the two primary sources.
So you read either Blackburn or Seaman.
Yes.
You read all the primary sources and see what sense you can make, what the conclusions you can draw about the worldviews of the authors, the creators of these primary documents. Not just in relationship to your own point of view, but in relationship also to the point of view of either Blackburn or Seaman.
I think that's a really interesting exercise this week, because oftentimes we read an historical text and we think, oh, I understand that subject now. But these two authors have really quite different views on what that relationship was all about. They see it really quite differently. And I think in our discussions this week, I think we can work with that basic distinction.
Yeah, so keep an eye on the overall discussion in your forum, with an eye to how the other group is understanding the documents, the primary documents, in relationship to the secondary documents. This exercise in historiographical and historical thinking is related to many of the exercises that we've done previously in this course, just to connect the toolbox project for this lesson to earlier ones. So if you think back, for example, to the lesson on the British agricultural revolution or revolutions, there we had everyone read two historiographical sources or excerpts from two. And we did the same thing last week. This week, we're getting you to combine that reading of secondary sources, historiographical sources, with your own close reading of primary sources.
Good exercise.
Important exercise. It's also important for the final project and the final exam. So
where we're headed.
That's where we're headed. Practice regularly, practice weekly, practice really thoughtfully this week, and you're on a great course to a good completion of the course.
Excellent.